Well, this is something I've never seen in my thousands of hours playing these games. A random low-level NPC being able to block the tiger drop, one of, if not the, fans' favorite move, and was powerful at that. This is something I've only ever seen a Mon do through someone else's gameplay. Maybe this guy is some special hidden character, a la Akiyama in Yakuza 1. Nah, just like that Amon footage I mentioned earlier, it's probably a glitch with the Dragon Engine, allowing NPCs to block any attack if their physics bug out or something. However, my first thought after recovering from how stunned I was, and saving the footage of course, was wow, maybe this guy can place Yagami in Judgment 3. If you have been following the news, you know RGG and the agency that represents Takuya Kimura, Yagami's Japanese voice actor, have been involved in a bit of a stalemate. From what we can gather, which I stress isn't much, the agency isn't too keen on allowing the PC release of the games due to the platform's capabilities, or rather ease of capabilities, to alter the characters and thus the likeness of the actors. You can see why Stadia, which the newest Judgment version is available on, wouldn't be a problem. Also, Stadia isn't available in Japan. Not much has been said beyond that. Some, I would say wild, speculations of the series ending because of this have been floating around, mostly in headlines and titles to attract clicks, but the fact is we are just as ignorant as before this information. Now you can see the reasoning in my head when the Scar tier NPC showed up in my late game run after the Platinum Trophy. Also, VGC, I don't know how to say this, but Like a Dragon isn't a spin-off at all in any sense. I mean, the series have spin-offs. You're writing about one in this very article, so I have no idea how you couldn't grasp that. I mean, research was done to get this information right. How difficult is it to Google Yakuza Like a Dragon and see the Wikipedia article calling this the 8th game in the series? For fuck's sakes, man, the game's name in Japanese is Ryuga Gotoku 7, RGG 7.
龍が如くセブンフォート闇の行方
Or fucking Like a Dragon 7, Whereabouts of Light and Darkness. Come on. How are you gonna write an article about the behind the scenes of the studios and actors and agencies and all that and not proofread its part? Especially when talking about the main series. I know it's one line, but still. However, actors changing the direction of an RGG project isn't unheard of, and as surprisingly enough, it's happened with major characters before. In fact, the first time it really got attention in the West was for the first release of Judgment. News around Judgment was now in the Western spotlight after the Yakuza series had made its big splash in the West circa 2017 thanks to Yakuza 0. The next project the studio back in Japan was working on was 2018's Judgment after having just released Kiwami 2 and Kiwami 6 before that. So when the news broke that Pierre Taki had been arrested on suspected cocaine usage and thus was going to be scrubbed from Judge Eyes, the Japanese name, and the name it was known by at the time, by RGG, it made for a much bigger story here in the West. I even remember the news making its way to the Abroad in Japan podcast, so needless to say, that's when most of us became acquainted with just how seriously Japan and the Japanese companies take the accusations of drug use. It is still ironic how an actor playing a Yakuza kingpin can get done in so incredibly harshly for suspected drug usage, you know, the thing that is definitely linked to the actual Yakuza and underworld in Japan. Meanwhile in the West, it's almost assumed that cocaine flies in every big entertainment space unless proven otherwise. It just isn't a big deal. Speaking of drug usage, the final major change to these games was done to one of my favorite characters, Tanimura, and his voice actor, Hiroki Narimiya. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but let's move on. It's a tragic story really, and I would encourage you to go and read the full story. I'll link it below, because it goes further than just maybe drugs were involved. It involves a tabloid, negative drug test results, framing, and relentless spite. However, the gist of it is that Narimiya was only accused of using cocaine. Seems to be the drug of choice for the Yakuza. Back in late 2016. It was, and I need to stress this, only accusations of drug usage and a little pushback to a legitimate test that forced Narimiya to step away from acting, at least in Japan. This presented trouble for RGG 3 years later when the remastered collection for the Yakuza series was set to be released. Apparently, RGG felt the need to replace Narimiya with Toshiki Masuda. It could be positive or negative. Maybe they wanted to respect Narimiya and the spirit of him leaving the industry, or it could be because they wanted to distance themselves from the, I feel personally, wronged actor. At the end of the day, these stories are incredibly wild to me. First off, you can poke many holes in the whole PC games can be modded, therefore licensing likeness is bad argument. However, we don't even know if that's the case, and it's quite possibly just a rumor born of the fact that the rest of the series is now on PC and Xbox, by the way. However, it would be wild to end Yagumi's adventures after just 2 games, especially in this series. Or maybe it won't be. We have to play Lost Judgment when it comes out in September to actually see. However, if it isn't the main reason, it would be very dumb. Next is just the insane cultural differences between the East and the West when it comes to drug use. Not going to go into it too much here, but I will point out how common it is to have actors of all sorts freely associated with drugs, anywhere from caffeine to cocaine in the West, contrasted with Japan for reasons I can't wrap my head around. However, I obviously believe, even in Japanese framework of thinking, that both situations involving these games were handled poorly by the public. And when I say public, I fully admit I don't know if these are the actual opinions of Japanese public or just the perception Japanese companies have of the Japanese public. First off, Hamura is Yakuza. Taki acts in Yakuza films. Isn't it a bit, expected? Even so, to pull a game off shelves and frantically rush in a patch that patches him out is such a huge inconvenience on everyone involved. I honestly think if they went with the excuse of, well, it's a little too late now, innit, everything would have just flown by, fine amongst all. Finally, a malicious tabloid and some sketchy reporting shouldn't be enough to force a genuinely hardworking and great guy that had to endure so much in his life already out of an industry. The associations with this type of crime shouldn't be so heavy that questioning the legitimacy becomes toxic. It seems it's a very high tension world out there in Japan, and really does help cement the joke that an NPC who becomes powerful due to a bug might actually be a better person to base a main character off of, because they don't have a real life actor that can fall under some ridiculous Japanese scrutinization.